probably,
good.
you know, I just think it's a great opportunity for people just to try to
Yeah.
take care of themselves.
Just do
you know,
something,
that's
yeah. Yeah, and it's so flexible.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, that's, you know.
It is,
So,
yeah.
it'll be good. 7 o'clock.
It is.
It is.
And in that case, let us call the meeting to order. Let's stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. This will be an adventure. This is our first ever combined in-person and remote board meeting. As such, in keeping with state law, I will now call the roll. Under subsection 403-A of 1 MRSA, I, Joe Long, Board Chair, will confirm that each member of the MSAD 35 School Board can both hear and be heard. I, Joe Long, Board Chair, will do this by calling the roll. Members present are asked to say yay. We ask that all members listen and report any audio difficulties when the roll is complete. Ms. Berman.
Here.
Mr. Taylor.
Yay.
Ms. Flynn.
Yay.
Ms. Therian.
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
All members are present. Ms. Berman, Mr. Taylor, either of you having issues with the audio?
Audio is great.
Excellent.
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Thank you. That brings us to the, we have no requests for public comment on items not on the agenda.
Yes.
So we will proceed to the report of the secretary. I would entertain a motion, please, to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
I move to consideration and action to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, January 6, 2021.
I'll second.
And that's Jen with the second. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? I did have a couple of observations.
I just had that one at the end.
Yep.
That I believe Heather and Jen, if I'm correct, that, let's see, Heather motioned to adjourn and Jen seconded
Yes.
versus what's there now.
That was one of my 2 notes as well. Heather was the motion to adjourn and Jen was the second.
Yes.
I had one thing.
Go ahead, sir.
It was perimeter, and I think it should have been parameters.
That was my other one.
All right, good catch, team.
I have to go better where I can hear
Under
it. I've got too
report of
much
the
background noise even with my headphones, so
So
just
under,
be relocating
Yeah.
here.
Under report of the superintendent number 2, at the very last sentence, he will need to review these new parameters. I think she might have been the victim of an autocorrect.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any other comments or questions?
Nope.
We will vote by taking the roll. Ms. Berman.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Yay.
Ms. Flynn.
Yay.
Ms. Therian.
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
And I too am a yay. That is 6-0. Thank you. That brings us to the report of the chair. The only item on the report is that we did in fact have a town officials meeting on January 13th. It was actually quite productive, a lot of topics. Ms. Therian or Ms. Flynn, would either of you care to jump in? And
I'll start and you can jump in if you have anything to add. So we started, John talked about the updated COVID recommendations and guidelines around outbreaks and school closures. Just that it was a bit more ambiguous as far as what the guidelines were for school closure. It was more up to the school district than previously. There was some discussion about COVID vaccination rollout. No real conclusions there, just some general discussion. Perry asked about dates for the budget voting, just to make sure there was no scheduling conflicts there. Perry also discussed the town budget and being prepared for March. And I have something here about reporting town emergencies to, is Jay Readymaker, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Discussed school funding for next year at the state level and possible cuts and being prepared there. Reviewed briefly health insurance carriers and benefits. And then there was some discussion about the fuel bid for the diesel, the towns joining with the schools to purchase for better pricing. And then Abby at the end brought up some discussion around the current events nationally with the happenings at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago and how the kids were feeling, and offered her support there. What did I miss?
Well done.
Is that
Very
it?
well done.
Yeah?
Excellent.
The only thing I would add that I think is noteworthy, Perry did give us an update on his replacement. And now I can't find it. Here it is. He's expecting that the new town manager will be hired on sometime in the May or perhaps early June timeframe.
Okay.
But he's going to build the budget for that manager so that they'll go through the budget process with Perry at the helm. I think that was pretty much everything. Well done. Thank you.
Mhm.
Great. That brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Fantastic. I just wanted to lead off tonight with a little bit of a budget update. It's been a little bit concerning going in, obviously, amongst the pandemic around what finances we can expect from the state. And so we've been preparing for the worst just because we just weren't sure. And so we do have some data that we were able to pull off the Department of Education website, which kind of gives us some indicators of how things are right now, which I think is somewhat encouraging. So I've asked Ryan to share that with you all this evening to kind of go through that worksheet. So Ryan, if you want to do that, that would be great.
Good evening. There's a packet or a 6-page document in your folders. It is a spreadsheet with a lot of numbers on it. If you turn to page, I believe it's page 4, and about, I don't know, a third of the way down the page is a MS-80 35 RC 35. And the first column is obviously the district name, and then we have the state valuations for FY21 and FY22. Again, those are not the state valuations. They're a year behind, so it says FY22, but it's really the state valuation for 21 and then 20. But the years are more tied to what the subsidy formula dates are. So as you can see for MS-80 35, that's the combined state valuation for South Berwick and Elliott. The first one being last year's is $1.646 billion. For next year, or for our next subsidy calculation, it is $1.715 billion. So that is an increase of about 4%. And the way the state subsidy formula works is they take a total pool of dollars and then they allocate that out amongst all the districts that are eligible for state subsidy. So the state has already put out the total dollars that they're going to put out for state subsidy. It's about flat. It might be a few $1 million increase, but over the whole state, that's really about flat. So as long as we remain kind of within the state average for valuation, that metric should not affect our state subsidy. If you flip to the last page of the document, in bold, the last numbers, the totals, you can see that the state percentage valuation change for valuation is 4%. So we're right in line kind of with that state average. So we should not see a large increase or decrease to our subsidy based solely on our valuation. As I said during the Finance and Facilities meeting, there are several dozen factors, several dozen variables within the state subsidy formula. This is a big driver, so this is a good sign for us that we're flat, but there could be other changes that would negatively or positively impact our state subsidy. So moving on to the middle set of columns, those are our enrollments for this year and last year, but they're not really the enrollments for this year and last year. It's actually a 2-year average of enrollments. So it's like this year and then last year and the year before. That's how the state does it. So it's actually like a 2-year average and a 2-year average. If you look at MS-80 35 again, we have a decrease of about 34.5. That's why we have a half pupil because it's an average, it's not, obviously we can't have a half a student. But the overall decrease in enrollment is about 2%. Again, if we flip back to that last page of the document, the overall statewide decrease in enrollment is 3%. So we did a little bit better than the state average as far as a decrease in enrollment. We had less of a decrease than the state average. The more pupils you have, the more subsidy you get. So since we did better than the state average, that would be a positive marker for us. So if you look overall, there's in the far right set of columns for MSAD 35, that overall impact or percent change in our subsidy, and it's not the percent change in our subsidy, I shouldn't say it that way. The overall impact of those two factors combined is 6%. Again, if you flip to the back of the document, the state average is 7%. So we're a little bit below that state average. That's good news for us. We should see a positive overall impact based on those two factors put together. We should see a small increase in our subsidy. Again, there's several other factors which haven't been released yet, but Mr. Caverly asked me to go through these numbers with you tonight. Are there any questions on that?
So what's the purpose? Like, why did I think this is important to show you? Because we don't know yet the numbers. And so our understanding is that sometimes next week, those ED 279s will be released, and so we'll have a better idea of exactly how much money we're going to get from the state. But this kind of gives us an early idea. So we have been preparing for a significant decrease, just because I think it's important to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And so this starts to give us a little bit of good news. Not going to get too excited because there's a lot that can happen in a week and a half, but just to kind of give you a sense of where things are. Obviously, from the budgeting standpoint, we start with the number of students that we have, and so that's the beginning of everything for us. It's driven by student population, so we drive our supply money on that, we would drive our staffing on that. So that's really where we begin. The curveball for this year is really how do you take into account the loss due to the pandemic? And how do we manage that? And so we're trying to find a way to manage that within the budget, but there are some federal monies that may be available that may be an assistance as well. So there's going to be, I think this will be a little bit more of a confusing budget year because there might be a couple of different funding sources, but just to kind of give you a sense of where we're at. I say it, and I say it because it's, I feel like I have to say it because I just think there's a math reality to this, is that, 5 or 6 years ago, Dr. Nash talked a lot about, feeling like 5% growth in our budget every year was a realistic amount, and 2.5% of that would come from the state, 2.5% of that would come from the communities, and so that 2.5% increase has always been what we've held ourselves to. As our population goes down and we become less of a receiver than we were a few years ago. So a few years ago, we were a 45%, 50% receiver. Now we're more like a 32% receiver, 33%. Is that about right, Ryan?
Yes.
And so that 2.5% does not cover what it did because we're not getting from the state what we did before. And so let me just give you an example. And I'm just telling you this because I think it's going to be part of the conversation that we have when we present the budget to you in March. But basically, that 2.5% increase last year was about $440,000, which is a lot of money. But when you look at the number of employees in the school district as a whole, the increase to health insurance by itself was about $400,000 that we planned for kind of going into it. And so that's before you talk about a single raise, you talk about inflation, you talk about anything else. And so we were able to do that last year. I think last year we came in at like 1.67 because we really kind of were very mindful as we kind of went through everything. But I just want to caution everybody that we're going to try to keep things as low as we can, but at the same time, we're trying to balance off of getting everything that we need to be able to do to be successful for these kids as well. And so there's and I think it's important that we all have that conversation, that you know that going into it. I'm going to bring to you a number that I feel like is realistic and is something that could be supported by the district, but at the same time, we are in an economic downturn in our economy, in our state right now. We need to be very mindful of that. And so there's going to be some tough conversations that we have to have. And so the last 3 days, Ryan and I have been going school to school and having some really hard conversations with principals to say, look, we've got to make some tough decisions here about what things look like. At the same time, we go back to our strategic plan and say, like, what are those 6 things that are most important? And so what are the high leverage things that we do? And so that's the work that we're doing right now. And I just tell you that because we're in the midst of that process right now. And so we're holding our breath and we're hoping for the best. But at the same time, I think we're trying to get contingency plans in place to say, look, what does this look like and how do we sustain this? And in the midst of this all, we're going to be negotiating with our 3 major bargaining groups, which is, it's a tough time to do that because we just don't know what the economic future looks like right now. So just wanted to cover that with everybody. Is there any questions?
No, I don't think so.
And I'm not saying it to scare anybody. I just think it's important that, I'd rather say it now and that we have a kind of a common understanding so that when I present it to you, you'll understand, hey, where did this number come from? What does this mean? So this is all kind of part of the formula as we put it together.
Yeah, we need to be preparing ourselves as a board for what this conversation is going to look like, because we have these conflicting forces at work. right?
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
especially as you put it, in light of the learning loss that we're going to have to address next year.
Yeah. And one of the things that we did years past, and I think it was the right decision at the time, don't misunderstand me, but is that we were able to pull a lot of money out of facilities and finance, out of our facilities monies, which you can do, but
Short term.
short term.
Yeah.
And I think we did it long term, and so then all of a sudden, boilers started having problems, and we're borrowing money to do boilers, and then, pavement didn't get done. And so we've over the last 18 months, I think we've started to really get ourselves back to a better place. So I just think, again, like, it's easy to say, hey, look, we're going to take 2 school buses out of the budget, which is fine. Like, that's some of the things that we plan to do as part of this. But the tricky part is you've got to have the discipline, 4 years from now, to remember to put that money back in. Yep. That's the catch, And so just being mindful and just being, but at the same time, as I told you before, when we had the CRF money, I really, probably to a fault, wanted to make sure that we set ourselves up for the best situation now and going forward. It wasn't just, what can we spend on now, but it's also just being smart about how does this impact things going forward, so.
I really appreciate you giving us this overview and what to expect, because I'm very conscious of the community and how people are struggling now during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And asking for, to raise their taxes to cover our costs here at the schools. It's going to be a
It's
tough
hard.
one.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So thank you for all the background
Oh, no,
information on
you're
this. I
welcome.
appreciate that.
And that's something that, that we've really got to, there's a balancing act here. And we're going to try to, there's a lot of forces. And so I feel good about where we are. I mean, I don't feel, there's some tough discussions that we have to have, and that's okay,
Yes.
but I feel like we're going to be okay. I think using the strategic plan to help guide us is a really important component to say, here's what we value as a district. And, creating plans to say, like, if we're not here today, how do we get there 3 years from now? Because we can't necessarily build everything in one day, and that's part of, some other conversations that we're going to have tonight, which is a conflicting factor that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, which one of I just go into now.
Yeah. And these data from the state, these initial data, are a potentially hopeful first sign.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. I was pleasantly surprised. I had heard a little bit differently than what Ryan had heard. I had heard that there was about a 2% reduction from the state. I like Ryan's news better, so I'm sticking with that in the midterm. But I had prepared for the 2.5 to 3% if it's lowered. Special ed is a different funding formula. I mean, it's really about the money that you spend the previous year,
Sure.
and so that's going to fluctuate a little bit as the needs of our students change, and so it's something that we're being mindful of. I will say, I am thrilled at the thoroughness that Mr. Rooney is kind of going through the special education budget with, and really thinking about, Medicare billing. Is there different ways that we can bring this program back into the district to save some money? There's some opportunities maybe with some other revenue sources that we're trying to pull in. So we're really trying to not only, part of this conversation is how do we spend less money and how do we ask the towns for less money, but how do we generate more money? And so just trying to find that balancing act. So he's done a fantastic job for us, so.
And how it's allocated. And I have to say, just, and I'll mention this just because Heather wasn't here last year, and actually Jen wasn't here last year either. So what's so wonderful, I think, about the budget process, especially with John and Ryan in charge of presenting it, is that you really do get such a clear understanding of the support for a lot of the decisions that are made in putting it together in the first place. It's a beautiful presentation. I highly recommend to the community that they follow along with us through the process by watching the live streams and attending the meetings, because it's incredibly educational, and I think it'll help whatever the outcomes are and the decisions and recommendations that are being made to have a really clear understanding of why they're being made
Yes.
and why funds have been allocated the way that they have been in the recommendations.
Just try to be as transparent as we can be.
It's-
Just people know, and
It was
that's the hope.
mind-blowing last year.
Yeah.
It was such a beautiful and helpful presentation for me to understand. That was my second round of budget conversations, and it was night and day from the year before in terms of getting it and understanding, and that was in one basic meeting.
Yeah.
And a very
Thank
clear
you for saying that.
outline, PowerPoint, presentation, rationale. It was just really helpful.
And a week later, COVID hit, right? That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
crazy to give you kind of a sense of where we're at.
Can I ask you one question, John, in regards to what you mentioned about revenue sources and bringing in other opportunities? Now, do you have a grant writing group in the district that would be also researching on other opportunities to bring in funds to the district?
Really, our grant writing group is Heidi. So she,
Our grant writing group, our division.
I'll be honest with you, and so we really try to look at that. But she is really the person who we look to with the grants and looking at different opportunities with that. So I think that's probably going forward something that we need to look at more, and being able to leverage those things as best we can. But that certainly could be an area that we look at more going forward. One of the things that came up is CDS with the public pre-K, and so looking at maybe doing that a little bit differently and being involved with that here in our district. So Scott, again, it's very early, but they had put an email out saying, look, is there any school districts that may be interested? And I think we wisely raised our hand and said, look, we'd like to be involved with the conversation. And so looking at that, and it may not necessarily be a huge revenue source, but it is an opportunity to get our kids earlier
Yeah.
and get them integrated into our system and be able to help them at an earlier age, which I think it has, obviously long-term value as well. One of the things, and I'm not sure if everybody's aware of this, but about 6 years ago, Dr. Nash created a partnership with the Noble School District, and it was around technology. And what kind of has happened is that the technology director is technically employed by Noble, but we pay half of that person's salary and we share that position. So there's a technology director that we kind of, it's a form of revenue for them to be able to, this their employee, but we pay for half of that. And then there's an installer who does really, runs the wires, really handles the infrastructure. And so those two people that we pay to have their services half-time. And then we have two people who are really kind of the nuts and bolts, let's make the internet work, people, firewall, boots on the ground, that we rent to them, or rent's a bad word, but cost share with them. And so that's been a relationship that's got pluses and minuses, I think. I think sometimes you get some more expertise because you've got more people around the table. I think, there's forever, I feel like whenever you share a position, there's always, at some point, something's going to be the priority. And I think there's always a push and pull. And so I got a phone call from Audrey Bouvert, who is the superintendent at RSU 60, and she said to us that she was going to pull back the director and the installer. And so that we would lose our director of technology and we would lose the installer. Obviously, I, at that point, said, then we'll pull back our two people so that, we'll kind of be back at baseline, so we have our two people that we have, and we'll lose the revenue source. But we've got to figure out what we're going to do because we need a director. And so that will be kind of part of the budget process. One of the things that really, and I'm sure this will be a surprise to anybody, that has really hit us square in the eyes is that we have got to do a better job technologically, and we've learned that through the pandemic. And so, Zoom for many of us, and just to be honest, I'm sure this was for many of you, a year ago was not something that was necessarily an everyday term, and so we had to learn a lot on the fly. And so creating the infrastructure, getting our own leader, we're going to have to do that. And so what I am going to recommend is that we post that position immediately, because a lot of districts are also having the same epiphany that we're having. And obviously it would be July 1st would be the start date, but I think if we post that sooner rather than later, it's important that we have somebody. And then I will give you the whole breakdown of kind of looking at technology from the budgetary standpoint of how we would do that and how we restructure that entire department. One of the good things with the CRF monies is that we bought a lot of the stuff So like having stuff isn't an issue. It's using the stuff appropriately, learning how to use it and supporting it. And that's part of where we've fallen down over the last year as I kind of look back over things. So just wanted to give you kind of an update. So I will post an anticipated opening tomorrow. We'll see what we have. We have some really good people that are internal. We'd be curious what their level of interest will be. But I do think we need to get on it sooner rather than later because I just don't want to get caught
Very good.
behind. We can't find anybody, so.
Will we get that, we'll get that notification, right?
Yes, you will.
Okay, good.
Yep.
I've got a couple family member contacts in other school districts who actually play that role, so that who knows who they know, or.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
Pass it along.
So we really, that was really the last cost-sharing agreement that we had. Originally, we had the technology, we had the facilities, and we had the curriculum, and we shared those three positions across the two districts. And so, with technology being gone, that is really the end of that kind of
Hey, John,
cost-sharing.
adult ed.
Adult ed, sorry, with 60, but adult ed is with Kittery. But with 60, that kind of ends that role with them. And I think, we're both, the timing is not great, but I think it's something that I think we had to face eventually anyway, so we're gonna tackle it as we go forward, so.
What were the reasons behind Noble?
I think I think basically they've got 2 or 3 buildings that are under major renovations, and so I think, Chris is getting pulled in a lot of different directions, and so, you think about it, like Lebanon Elementary School to Elliott Elementary School, that's quite a distance, and so I think there's a lot of time where he could be in the car, or,
Yeah.
I think it's hard to try to balance everything, in fairness to him, so, I think it makes sense for them. I mean, I think this is an opportunity for us. I think in some ways, losing the director is really difficult. I think we're very fortunate that the 2 people that we have are highly qualified, which is really important. So what their skill sets are just, are fantastic.
Yep.
So, we'll work that through. But I did want to kind of give you a little bit of an update as far as what that is.
Is it okay to pause and ask Sue and Matt if they have any questions about
Yeah, of
either of
course.
those
Yeah,
topics?
yeah, yeah.
Sue, Matt, any questions or comments?
I don't at this time. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Sue?
No, me either. It was,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Sorry.
I bet you number 4 there's going to have some questions, though, because that's going to get interesting today, because it's been a long day with this.
It's coming, it's coming.
So next is negotiations. Just a quick update. I was reached out to by President Luciano today and asked that we could have our first negotiation session on February 11th, which is the Thursday before the break. What I would like to do, I will send a memo out to Joe, Jen, and Sue to see if we can meet next week, preferably next Friday, if that would work. But I'll send that memo out just so we can kind of get together and start talking about the work that we've done. I have met with Dr. Nash to talk a little bit about kind of, the philosophical approach that she used to negotiations, as we had talked about in the executive session, of just trying to get some more experience with that. And then we do have a workshop on Friday, basically built around negotiating during the pandemic, and then also there's a couple of law changes that will be quite a big shift for us, and so we just want to kind of get the legal, aspect of those before we get too far into negotiations. So, but I'll send out an email tomorrow.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, wait, just one question. So will the whole board be invited to any type of workshop or presentations prior to the negotiations, or is it just the committee that was
In the
signed up?
past, that's been confined to the negotiating committee, right?
Yeah, and we have
Yeah.
done executive sessions though along the way to give people kind of, this is where we're at.
Oh.
These are the proposals, just to kind of say, here's an update, basically, is what has happened in the past.
Right.
And that's up to you, how all of you like to handle that
Yeah.
going forward. So,
I mean, my previous experience, this is my first year on the negotiating committee, so I was being the beneficiary of those occasional executive sessions. That worked pretty well for me. I think I learned what I needed to learn as a board member through that
typically, the
mechanism.
first session is really about laying the ground rules and then talking about really the non-financial language issues. And then it's beyond that is when really the financial implications. And so I would be more than happy if we want to have an executive session to be able just to kind of share, once we get closer, to say, maybe that first meeting in February, just to say, look, this is what we're looking at. Here are the levers that we want to
Yeah.
talk about.
Sure.
I'd be more than happy to do that. That would
That'd be
helpful.
great.
Let's
Okay,
plan on that.
thank
That's a
you.
good idea. Thank you.
Number 4. Well, I guess there was a saying that my mother used to say, if you don't like the weather in Maine, wait, because it will change. And that's kind of how it feels a little bit about COVID-19 right now. And so I expressed to you a couple weeks ago how things had really kind of shifted. And so I came to you and said, look, here are some ideas. And really, because of the changes that have occurred with the CDC, the changes don't make any sense anymore. I hate to say it that way, and that's the reality, because they really have taken that. Originally, they had that caveat that said if you had 3 cases in the building and it was an outbreak, either everybody gets tested or we're going to close for 14 days, basically is what it said. And that has all been removed now. Which, in fairness, I think that's done because the data statewide says that schools are safer. So in-school transmission is lower than community transmission. I will say that the 27 cases, per, whatever, 1,000 that they mentioned in that the Department of Education shared, our numbers within our district are much higher than that. So just, I want to be 100% transparent about that. So I think basically where we're at is that we would have to close school because staffing. And so, for example, if I were a high school student and I had 4 classes and I perchance tested positive and I walked into a classroom and spent more than 15 minutes in a classroom, everybody in that classroom in that period is then quarantined. You can imagine quickly if just 3 students were impacted, how all of a sudden you're talking about 12 staff members, and it becomes a very, very difficult number to be able to manage running a building. One of the things where the high school is very different is that if I'm a staff member, let's say, so pretend I'm not a student now, I'm a staff member, and I'm out for a class, the class where the student test was positive, that whole class would be remote. That's kind of the easy part. The tricky part is my other 2 classes that I have that would still be in person, but I wouldn't be there. And so that adds, so because I'm out, you're going to have to pull another staff person to be able to monitor those other students as they kind of learn remotely. So that's kind of the curveball. Whereas if I am at Central Elementary School, let's say, and I'm a first grader, and someone in the first grade class was ill, typically it would probably be the teacher in the class, but really the class learning remotely, there's not a whole lot of impact. It doesn't necessarily impact the 2 teachers down the hallway, with the exception maybe of like your specials, or if there was an ed tech in the class, that would be the other variable. So they're very, very different cohorting. So staffing is really tricky, and so that might cause closure. Cleaning would be something that would cause closure, and so what does that mean? So there's an expectation of a deep cleaning anytime that there's a positive case in the classroom. And so if you're in an elementary school, cleaning one classroom is something that we could probably do in the evening and close that classroom off. That wouldn't necessarily be a huge issue. But if you were at the high school, let's say, and there was 3 or 4 kids who went across 4 classrooms plus a cafeteria plus a bus, and so all of a sudden to get that done in one moment is very, very difficult. So that might be a reason why we would have to close for cleaning, and that might be for a day or 2, maybe 3, depending on the building. The one that they say, and it just doesn't, there's no clarity to it, is really saying if there's a wide or rampant spread in the building. And so there's no definition of what does that mean. And so when we talk about this, having 3 cases at Trape Academy, which has 400 students, let's just say 350 students, that's still the same threshold as Bonnie Eagle might have, which has 2,000 students. And so they're very, very different. And so that's the thing I'm going to have to work on with the nurses to kind of get our head around, like at what point do we close things? To add a little bit of confusion to it, they still are using the term outbreak, but yet they're not treating it any differently than anything else. And so we're still having these meetings, but the meetings are becoming a little bit less directive and more kind of like, well, how can we support you? It's more of a collaborative as opposed to giving us these are what your steps you have to do. And so it's made things a little bit confusing. And so I really feel like the best thing that we can do right now is manage day by day.
Yep.
And I hate to say it that way. So for example, last week got heated. There were some points last week where it got a little bit, the numbers were getting a little bit high. Letters are coming out on a regular basis. You can see it as more letters come out, more numbers come out. You can do the math pretty quickly. So what I did is I had to call all the school principals and nurses together and say, look, how is your building? Because a number it could be 3 cases in a building, but if they're able to manage it because it's 3 cases that have a minimal impact, that's different than
Right.
3 cases have the maximum impact. So really differentiating for each school is kind of what we had to do. So that's,
Some of these cases didn't even have contacts.
that's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
So you're counting the number,
That's
but they're
correct.
not actually impacting, there was no one even needing to go.
That's correct.
out.
That's correct, yep. And so it became really hazy.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to have to continue to navigate that. Things could change, and then that's the part that like, we just have to get our heads around. For me, this is what's problematic. And so that would be my recommendation, is those would be the 3 reasons that we would probably close a building at this point.
Yep.
To close a district, I think that would be a different conversation, and I think that would be something that I would need to speak to all of you if I felt like we got to that point, to say, look, we're at a point where the positivity rate may be this high, or there's this number of cases, you know, and to get clarity on that, it's hard. So I think we're going to really have to talk to the nurses to get their guidance from that. So I felt really pretty good about things. And then last week, things got a little bit interesting in that on Friday, there was a meeting, and I'm going to paraphrase, and I might get some of the facts wrong, but basically, Commissioner Lambro made a comment about athletics, and she was asked the question about community athletics, and basically said, look, it's really up to the MPA. The MPA can do what they want to do. And that was not how the MPA had been approaching things, and how they wanted to approach things, or how we had, how it had been interpreted by us, to say the least. So, the MPA got wind of that, and obviously, I think there was some pressure put on them now, because now it's their decision. So they met today, and they had a meeting, and they've just released a statement about 6 o'clock tonight, which basically says that students in counties that are yellow may compete in athletics. And so part of me says, great, you know, I believe in athletics. I believe in kids getting involved. I believe in kids having an opportunity to be in, to be around each other. I do believe there's a cost for mental health, so I think there's some positives there. But it makes me a little bit nervous in the fact of how do you manage that in the midst of an outbreak? And so what does that mean? So we need to do some work on our end right now to kind of figure out what that means. And so this is where, like, literally hearing this an hour and a half ago, this is where my head is right now. If we were to run an extracurricular program, whether it's athletics, whether it's drama, whatever that may be, and we would treat it similarly to that we would treat a physical education class, that we would have the spacing that we would have, we would treat it just like we would during the school day, I think that that's something that we could do and we would want to do. I think to take things to games and traveling, I would have a hard time getting behind that if we were in the middle of an outbreak. I really do. I struggle with that a little bit. And so that's me just talking. I have not really talked to the nurses. I have not talked to Mr. Buzzell other than him saying, hey, I'm sending you a letter right now. So I think it's a good thing. But from my perspective, it's like this is out of left field. And so all of a sudden we're changing the rules as to how we're doing things. And I do appreciate that we want to get kids involved, and mental health of the kids is really important. I 100% agree with that, but I also want to be careful of, we're in the midst of a pandemic when numbers are escalating, and so how do we manage that? So this is something that's going to kind of fall on, unfortunately, the local districts, and there's going to be very little to no guidance from the state. And so the state really is kind of taking that guidance away. So I just want to kind of give you all an update as to what's kind of gone down in the last hour and a half or so.
The athletic
sorry.
directors are talking then.
Yeah, they are, and I think the hard part is I think you have some schools that, you have some schools whose high schools really haven't even been hit by COVID, maybe 1 or 2 cases, and so I'm sure they're like, let's go for it, and then you've got other places that are closed right now because they didn't have staffing, and so the questions would be, if you had to close because of staffing and you weren't in an outbreak, would you still hold practices?
Yeah.
I mean, so part of me says, well, yeah, if the reasons we're closing is because we can't, if we can have people to run the practices, I think we would do it, but like
Right.
these are the type of things that we're going to have to work through. The outbreak thing, I am stuck on a little bit, that I just with a straight face, I don't know if we would want, I don't know if I were a school receiving another team to come play, like, for instance, if Freeport wanted to come play here and they were in the midst of a pandemic or in the midst of an outbreak, I'm not sure if that would be a good idea. And so I think we've got to think about that a little bit and get our heads around it. But at the same time, I think kids need to get to be around kids. And I think we got to find a way to do that. But if we can do it safely, and so in my mind, there isn't a whole lot of difference between a physical education class and then if you structure an activity with some parameters around it, you know, where it might be skills and drills or, you know, there's spacing. I think there's some ways that we can do that, but we've got to have some deeper conversations about
Yep.
that. But-
Yep.
So I think on one hand, it's a good thing. I
Wow.
think the other hand of it is, I think we just got to work out the details because there's going to be a lot of questions that come up, so.
There's so many variables to this that I feel like, I mean, on the one hand, the community organizations out there have all figured, they're all moving forward.
Yes.
You know, and had our students known ahead of time, or without waiting, and is it gonna be yellow? What point are we gonna have a season? Are we not gonna have? They would have just gone to the community programs.
Yeah.
They would have been carpooling, they would have been doing whatever.
Right.
And in fact, some of them are right now.
Absolutely.
And so, one of my concerns is kind of like for the future of our athletic program, with that in mind. I think it's really important to take that into consideration, but also, my concerns are 100% with you. But at the same time, it's all kind of happening anyway.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Mr. Buzzell has done an incredible job of getting prepared for this exact situation, and I think that's a huge plus that we have going for us, and I think he worked very closely with the other athletic directors around the same plan, like what if we're given an option? Can we do this safely?
Yep.
You know, and I'll use the ski team because my kid's on ski team, and that's one of the situations where, oh my goodness, how do we do that? I mean, the kids have to get to Shawnee Peak, they got to get over to Gunstock, you've got buses. No, you can't have two families in one car, so can parents get out early to individually take, so we have less kids on the bus? I mean, it's very complicated.
Absolutely.
Can it be done?
Sure.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we've got some amazing families and
Yeah,
kids and
absolutely right.
people who are willing to figure it out, so.
I think skiing's a great example, Lisa,
Yeah.
is that, you know, and I think that's part of where the MPA's frustration was, is that on one hand, you're telling these community organizations, it's okay for you to go do this, and so
Right.
people can hop in a car and go to ski at
Right.
you know, Gunstock, let's just say, but yet if we want to have our ski team go there, we can't do that, and even though we're going to be more conscious of being mindful of the safety protocols.
Right.
And so
Right.
I think that's part of the reason, and I do
It's
believe,
tricky.
bottom line is that, you know, there are some serious mental health
Yes.
of concerns that I have with kids being isolated.
Yep.
Yep.
And I just think
Yep.
it's important for kids to be around kids. And so whatever we can do safely, then, you know, that would be where I would want to start, is, you know, but at the same time,
It's tough.
I think there's got to be some common sense at some point to say, wait a second, like,
Yeah.
look, there's no bigger sports enthusiast in this
Right.
community than I am, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, we have got to be safe, you know, and I think that's really important to be able to do that. So we'll meet tomorrow, but there is a potential that, you know, next week that we could start having kids after school and doing some things. I mean, like, I think there's, you know, we have to work those things out. I mean, but from a mechanical standpoint, it's all things that we will do. Don't misunderstand me, but it's not just like we can say, hey, look, we got the letter at 6 o'clock, we're going to practice tomorrow.
Right, yeah.
But like, let's just take the gym, for instance. So we've been using that gym as a study hall, and so there are desks in there, there are, you know, there is
Yeah.
coverings on the floor, so we're gonna now have to figure out,
Right.
every day, those desks are gonna have to get moved, the
Yep.
carpet's, you know, it's not a carpet, but the floor covering's gonna have to be
Yeah.
removed, we're gonna have to, you know, open the, like, so there's just some realities of we're now transitioning from a
Totally.
couple different spaces.
Yeah.
But you know, Rich and I will talk tomorrow. You know, I know that the nurses are gonna be concerned, there's no question about it. I mean, from a medical standpoint. They did say, though, that the sports medicine committee, you know, did say that it was, you know, it was better left it to the local decision on how to handle that, so. So on one hand, I think it's very exciting. I think there's an opportunity, and, you know, hopefully if we can get our numbers under control, that I'd love to see things. I mean, for me, the fact that we, you know, our numbers are high right now. There's no other way to say it. I think we had close to 20 cases in the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's something, you know, that's a lot, you know, and so I just think we got to be really mindful about what we do next. But we'll be working on it, and I will certainly share with you kind of what, you know, what our thinking is as we go forward. But
Definitely no easy answers, that's for
no,
sure.
no,
Right.
and you don't, and I don't want to say to kids, hey, no, we're not going to do it because, you know, I don't think any of us feel that way. But
Right.
we've got to.
Yeah.
But we've got to think through the variables before we dive in. I think that's the important part, and just being
Yeah.
conscious of that. You know, and that's where we've been all along, is just trying to be safe. Now, So this is the second time in the last 2 weeks where, you've had some pretty concrete things, and all of a sudden, in a swing of a bat,
Yep.
they're both gone. And so like we're rebuilding kind of what we've said and what we've had to communicate to people, so we're gonna have to work on that messaging as well, so.
I think your initial reaction was spot on. We need to start thinking outside the box and thinking of it as athletics as a PE opportunity. We have a beautiful facility outside as well, and modifications can be made to just get those kids together as a team, but not necessarily competing in various other communities.
Yeah.
to
If the goal
cause-
is mental health, right,
Yeah.
Exactly.
right. And not just, I'm always gonna say not just athletics.
Absolutely.
What does it mean for, yeah.
Absolutely. And so now there's some pretty clear, David and I have had a bunch of conversations, so there's some special masks that we've ordered for our band to be able to use,
Yep.
But even with, an example would be winter percussion, that David and I have had a conversation
Yeah.
about. We share those, or we co-op with Somersworth. And so we have kids from other
Right.
districts that kind of come in, and so like there's a lot to think about just to make sure,
Yeah.
and not to say that we can't do it, but I just think I would rather ask the hard questions before they hit us as opposed to just go run wild and all of a sudden, things have to go wrong. And so I get a lot of emails, people being very supportive, but at the same time, they want kids actively involved. And
Sure.
so, this is gonna be another one of those ripples in the community where people are gonna say, thank goodness, why didn't we do this
Right.
4 months ago? And there's gonna be other people saying, are you kidding
Are
me?
you
I get-
crazy? Yeah.
I get letters every day telling me
Right.
how it's an
Yeah.
outbreak and how the heck are we
You
gonna
didn't
talk
do
about
it
him?
then,
Right.
now you wanna do it now?
And
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
people are gonna be all over the place. So
Sure.
we've gotta find somewhere in the middle that makes logical sense for
Yep.
everybody.
Perhaps an
And-
update in
and-
2 weeks?
Say again?
Perhaps an update at our next meeting?
Yeah, it may come before that,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's gonna be an incredible amount of pressure that's gonna come
Yeah.
quickly.
Sure.
And
Oh,
so I
yeah.
think, we're probably gonna have to have some answers, by Monday would be my guess. And
Yep.
that's this kind of a self-imposed,
Yeah.
piece,
Sure.
but I think we're gonna have some tough meetings tomorrow to say, let's get our heads around this, what does this all mean? And, I do meet with all the York County superintendents on Friday, and so we'll have a conversation then, but again, like, that's a very, very different conversation, York, us have been pretty similar as far as
Numbers.
cases. Noble's been fairly similar. Trape's been pretty lucky, knock on wood for them, the numbers have been okay. Other places, have been a little bit less fortunate, so I think we just gotta be mindful as let's have those conversations ahead of time. But for me, safety and kids' health is gotta be at the center of that decision. It's not like, something making it harder on us isn't a reason not to do it. The reason that we wouldn't do it is because it wouldn't be safe, and the kids wouldn't be safe, and that's what we want to be mindful of, not because we'll, I don't want to punt because that's just too much work. That's not going to happen with us. We're going to
Yep.
find a way to make it
Right,
work,
of
and,
course.
we'll go from there.
But I have to say, this conversation feels very different from it was back in when was it, in the
In
fall?
the fall?
Right.
When we knew less about the virus and it was less clear when we were coming out of it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to drop the ball on the 5-yard line either,
No,
right?
but there is a part, Joe, that like, and I struggle with this, is like, I hear myself say it, is that, so we did all this wrangling in the fall, and we went into green, and we were talking about having, 300 positive cases at that time.
Yeah.
And yet, we're in January, and we have, I don't even know what the number is now of active
Yeah.
cases
Right.
in the state. Like
Right.
it just feels like we're loosening the reins as the pandemic has
Yeah.
worsened across the state. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that the data's not there. I'm just
Right.
saying, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
common, people are gonna ask these questions. And then we've
Exactly.
gotta be ready to say,
The York County numbers are coming back down a little bit. We've passed the holiday peak. The 7-day rolling average is back.
Yeah.
It's still way higher than it
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
in the fall, but it's much lower than it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks
and
ago.
let's get to spring, we can get back outside again.
Yes,
That's
yes.
where I am.
Exactly.
Open the
But I just wanna
windows,
give, so,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny, like, I write my agenda notes, I'm like, I don't really write a whole lot about the COVID, because it just feels like every time that I get ready to come to this meeting, there's just,
Right.
well, here's another curveball, and so
Right.
here you go,
Yeah.
so. But we will do some work tomorrow, and I think that's, I will certainly communicate with you over the next couple of days, or Rich will communicate, with all of us, so.
Excellent.
Thank you.
One more thing to throw out there that I'm curious, maybe the nurses could think or speak to it, but have they talked at all about I know the vaccine, which still is a ways off, I think, for kids at this point. But have they talked about the implications? It sounds like it's only gonna be for 16 and up, like, is that on anybody's radar?
Judy has been kind of talking that through a little bit. I think that, you know, from a morale standpoint, the state, how did they say it? They said that they were gonna move the 70-year-old population to the front of phase 1B.
Yep.
What they did is they pushed teachers down.
back, yeah.
You know, and like you can sell it any way you want to do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
but
it is what it
that's
is.
what happened.
Yeah.
That's pretty much
You know,
it,
so I
yeah.
think there is that, you know, and believe me, but I do think that there's some staff who are struggling with that a little
Right.
bit.
Yeah.
Just kind of feel like, you know,
Yeah.
Second, yeah.
we're here every day, I'm dealing with, you know, 100
Yeah.
different students, you know, I'm exposing myself, you know, and that was something they were hanging their hat on, and to feel like that they got kind of pushed back, you know, I think that there's a little bit of
I think Perry
Right.
was sharing a little bit of that too, that not even the town workers who are interacting with the public all day, they're not considered first responders.
And I guess
It's pretty
it goes to the
disappointing.
point of what we're talking about in the fall, like, this is the reality. So like, I don't magically, like, I think we thought, oh, January probably gonna be much better. I don't know that for sure fall could even look, like, we could still be having a lot of these same discussions, even if teachers are then vaccinated. We're still looking at a lot of likely unvaccinated kids. So what does that mean as far as athletics and after-school stuff? Like, I
Sure.
think
Or
it's
budget.
just, right,
You know, that's another,
Right,
that's all
right.
part of that conversation we had the last couple of days. So it's, you know, there's a lot out there, and please don't misunderstand, I'm not trying to say that the teacher should come before anybody. I'm just saying that I think when you feel like you're getting pushed back,
Yes.
there's a feeling of devalue.
yeah,
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and so I think there's a little bit of that that we're
Really
dealing with,
unfortunate.
you know. So.
Yep. okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
I have none. Matt, Sue, any other questions or comments?
Nope, I don't have any. Thanks.
No, me either.
Awesome.
So that concludes my report. Trevor, I'd love to hear from you, how things are going.
Yeah, it's just me today. So, perhaps to kind of put like a standpoint for the students for the MPA ruling of whatever it's called, it kind of gave hope for the students. Like, I know I'm a basketball player myself. I know a lot of people myself that play sports, and like over the past, like, I think it's been like over 7 weeks where like the possibility of sports have been canceled out from like the Yale County. But like this past week, I've actually been given hope, and like I've actually like started to get back into my old habits of like going for a good run and stuff like that, and like having the idea of maybe I can go back to basketball, because I know like 2 weeks ago I was not looking so good because those cases were so high. So I've kind of been like happy and like better mood now, knowing that we might be able to go back to play basketball and sports like that. And then so practically the other reports in my student report is this is the last week of semester 1. It's also the first week of the add and drop period for semester 2. This means that like you can add classes that you want and drop others. And practically, so Interact is starting to plan beach cleanups for the spring. And my last thing is that, as you guys might have seen your email, is the 2022 officers set up a fundraiser. It's a silent auction. I'm not sure if you guys saw that, and it's been practically been planning for a while now. Well, you might hear in the future. I think this is right now. It's in the phase where it's just getting all the stuff needed for it. Because I know myself, I'm participating in it, and I've seen the email and stuff like that. And then that's mostly it.
Trevor, did that email just come out today, or?
So I think it's been out for a while. I think we're just looking for, I'm trying to think of the word.
I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah, donations. We're looking for donations now.
Trevor, I haven't seen it either.
I haven't
If you
seen
could
I don't
send
think
it
any of
to
us have
us,
seen
that
it.
would be awesome. Think
Yeah,
you'd
I'll
do that.
talk to everybody else about it.
Thanks.
'cause I'll try to get the email out.
Get it out
Thank
to
you.
the families and staff for sure. Thank you.
I want, I'm a little bit nervous because I don't know if I was clear, but I just want to, you know, for the public that's listening, I am by no means saying that we are not going to be involved in athletics. What I'm saying is that we've got to think things through.
Yeah.
You know, that I would think every one of our goals is to be able to get kids actively involved as much as we can. But we have to find a way that makes safe, logical sense. And so that's the work that we're going to be
Yeah.
doing. So I don't want to give anybody the inclination that we're not doing that. That is not the case. But we do need to get a plan in place before
Sure.
we before we just dive
And
in.
we have to have the vigilance to detect when it's becoming problematic and be able to deal with it.
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we have to have the same level of scrutiny that we would have in the school day.
Agree.
Yeah.
That's gonna be, that's the important part.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't wanna get 25 emails.
Yeah.
That's not what I was trying to say.
Yes.
Just be clear.
Thank you for chiming in on that, though. Thank you very much. It means a lot coming from the students themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, that concludes your report? Yes?
That does, yes.
We have no correspondence upon which to report, which moves us into the report of the committees. So the Finance and Facilities Committee met earlier this evening. I'll run the numbers quickly, and then we'll ask Matt to talk about facility and transportation, and Lisa to talk about food service. In general, we're doing pretty well. We have our second 3 payroll month behind us now, and the cash balance reflects a decent position. We're running behind budget on both revenues and expenditures, with expenditures slightly ahead of revenues right now, but still in a good position relative to our time of year. Federal grants are coming in. Some of them, the local entitlement is running behind, I believe, but Title I and II coming in. Delta Education is net positive right now, on the same glide slope towards zero that it is every year. School nutrition is weirdly exactly in the same place that it was at this time last year, given that the circumstances are so different. So that's a good result. And the CRF funds, which we have been tracking separately now, we've started to get reimbursements. I want to get to the summary on that, because the important point that I wanted to make is that we took out a $2 million loan to float us by the reimbursement of those funds, and that loan is due in February, and the reimbursements are coming in somewhat slower than that. Let me get to the page quickly. We've had $131,000 come in through August. September has been submitted. Ryan's currently working on October and November. We have some big ticket items in that time frame, and perhaps even beyond that it will take time for those reimbursements to come in. So it looks like we might have to request an extension on that loan, which will cost us a little bit of extra interest. I think that was everything I wanted to say about the numbers. I don't think I missed anything major, did I? No? Okay, cool.
So,
Matt, if you can, please go ahead and give us an update on facility and transportation.
All right. Looks like we have 3 projects for facilities. First one at the Marshwood Middle School, developing an office for the resource officer, which includes a separate door, 2x6 construction for that. At the central office, we're focusing on the entryway door vestibule construction, which would include a second entry door. Currently in the process of obtaining an estimate for that. Over at the middle school, we're looking at repaving projects and focusing on a top coat option, but it's possibly an expensive project over the course of time. Let's see, transportation. There was a budget meeting with Heather, which included an electrical diagnostic tool, which is needed, which cost potentially about $7,000 for that equipment. That's about it for transportation. Food service, it appears as though we're planning possible van delivery service. Currently, people can also come and pick up food as well. I think that's about it.
Matt, I have one question. I think the paving project, did you say it was the middle school, or did I mishear that? Because it's the high school,
No,
isn't
so
it?
the paving projects are at the high school. Maybe I said the middle school, I apologize.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
To be clear, it is at the high school. Thank you. Good. Lisa, did we miss anything?
no, that's what I have.
Okay,
Want to do food service?
that concludes the report of the Finance and Facilities Committee. The Education Policy Committee next meets on the 27th of January, so we'll expect a report from that at our next meeting.
Did you want me to just touch on the food service part, Joe?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple little things here. So there's some planning in progress in case buildings do close to switch to a food delivery service, so using the vans and staff in that way, even for some of the current remote learners. So there's some investigation into how that might work and how we could do that while still continuing to have the option for everyone to be able to pick up their meals as they have been doing. And part of that came up because I guess there was an issue with high school students being in class during the hours that the pickup times were. And so that's what got that conversation going, so that the students would have, families would have more options to get the food to their homes.
Thank you for that. That brings us to new business. And we have, if I counted correctly, 8 second readings,
With roll call.
for which, by virtue of our current combined in-person and remote, we will have to do a roll call on each vote. Give me just a moment to prepare myself for that, and then we'll proceed. Okay, may I have a motion, please, to approve the second reading of JIC?
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy bullying, JICK.
I'll second.
That's Lisa for the second. Thank
Yep.
you very much. This is second reading. There have been no changes since our first reading. We discussed this at our last meeting. Does anybody have questions or comments?
Nope.
In that case, I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland,
Yay.
and I too am a yay. That is 6-0. Thank you very much. May I have a motion, please, on JIC-R?
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy bullying administrative procedure, JICK-R.
I'll second.
Jen Therian, second. Thank you. Same thing. Second reading, no changes since. Any further questions or comments?
Nope.
Excellent. In that case, I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
And I too am a yay. That is 6-0. Thank you. May I have a motion, please, to approve the second reading of JIC E1?
I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy bullying report form, JICK-E1.
Second.
That's Jen for the second. Thank you again. This is the report form. No changes. Any questions or comments? I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
I too am a yay. That is 6-0. Thank you. May I have a motion, please, regarding JIC E2?
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy bullying investigation and response form, JICK-E2.
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't see. Who seconded?
That's me.
Lisa, thank you. Lisa Flynn, second. Any questions or comments? I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
I too am a yay. That is 6-0. And we are halfway through. May I have a motion? Go ahead.
Want a break?
No, it's fine. I wish I could take water, but these masks make it difficult. May I have a motion, please, with regard to JIC E3?
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy bullying, summary of disciplinary and remedial actions, JICK-E3.
Second, Lisa.
That's Lisa with a second. Thank you. Any questions or comments? I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
I too am a yay. That is 6-0. Thank you. May I have a motion, please, with regard to JIC E4?
I move to approve second reading and discussion of policy bullying, reporting, investigation, and intervention/resolution process, the chart, JICK-E4.
I second.
That's Heather for the second. Thank you. Questions or comments?
cool chart.
Mm-hmm.
Cool
It's a great
chart, okay.
I love this chart.
Any other questions or comments? I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
I too am a yay, that is 6-0. May I have a motion, please, with regard to E ECAD?
I move we approve hold on, I lost track. I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy security camera system, ECAD, which is a new policy for adoption by the district.
I second.
Second is Heather Holland, thank you. Any questions or comments? I will call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
I too am a yay, that is 6-0. Thank you. And the last of these is E ECAD-R.
I move to approve a second reading and discussion of policy security camera system administrative procedure ECAD-R, which is a new policy for adoption by the district.
Second.
Lisa Flynn, second, thank you. Any questions or comments?
No,
I will
sir.
call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland,
Yay.
and I too am a yay, that is 6-0. That is the end of new business. Does anyone on the board have any other comments or questions?
Can I just throw one thing out, Joe?
Of course.
Before we adjourn? I was just sitting here thinking, and I really appreciate Heather's thoughts around the negotiations. I was just wondering, would it be helpful if I sent all of you a copy of the teacher's contract, just to be able to look at that ahead of time, just to kind of see
Certainly.
what the
Yeah,
contract looks like?
Yeah.
That
It's
might just-
online too, isn't it?
It is online,
Yeah.
yeah. I can send you just
Yeah.
a PDF of
Yeah,
that, but it might
that'd
just
be
be good
awesome.
just to familiarize yourselves with kind of the context of it. I don't think we've ever done that before, so
That'd be great.
just might help.
Sure.
I'll do that, I'll do that tomorrow. So,
Thank you.
thanks for the idea, Heather, I appreciate it. I just, as you said that about the executive session, I was like, I don't know if we necessarily have ever kind of just made sure, take a peek at the contract, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to add that Mr. Gratian has once again worked his magic for us. This is our first ever combined in-person and remote
Yes.
meeting, and
Thank
it
you.
has, in my opinion, gone flawlessly. Very
Yeah.
well done, sir. Thank you so much for the
Thank
support.
you so much. That was
Thank
very kind of you.
If
So-
there's no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn this
That
meeting.
is Heather.
And I will second.
That was
Jen.
Jen, okay. Once again, I must call the roll. Ms. Berman,
Yay.
Mr. Taylor,
Yay.
Ms. Flynn,
Yay.
Ms. Therian,
Yay.
Ms. Holland.
Yay.
I too am a yay, that is 6-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is bringing the folders helpful? Do we want to keep doing that?
Very
Oh my
helpful.
gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.